We descended through darkness thick enough to choke. My name is Dr. Evan Rourke, deep sea archaeologist, and if you're reading this, then maybe someone finally found the rest of the logs. Maybe someone else was stupid enough to follow the coordinates. Or maybe you're just next. The Mariana Trench has always felt like a graveyard, but this dive, this mission, felt different from the start. The water pressed harder. The silence wasn't passive. It was listening. Our submersible, Orpheus, creaked with every pressure shift. Even with its reinforced frame, each pop of the hull sounded too much like bone. We were nearly 11,000 meters deep, and there was no margin for error. I sat in the pilot's seat, glancing between sonar readouts and the flickering feed from the exterior lights. The cameras caught little beyond sediment swirls in absolute black. Captain Silva monitored life support while Lien, our exolinguist, sat hunched beside me, sketching something in her notebook. Probably another impossible symbol sheet scene in that Soviet black box. We weren't supposed to be here. Officially, this mission didn't exist. We'd been called in by a private scientific committee, former NSA and Russian defense, claiming they had intercepted coordinates embedded in corrupted Cold War-era data logs. A failed dive for 1952. No return. No details. Just a series of strange characters and seismic markers that led to this exact point. The trench floor was closer now. "Evan," Lien said quietly, not looking up. "You feel that?" I hesitated. I did. A low thrum in my skull. Not a sound exactly. A presence. Like static behind the eyes. "I feel it," I admitted. "EMP pulse," Silva asked from behind us, trying to keep it light. "Or we've all got trench fever." None of us laughed. "Lights ahead," I said. The gloom parted slowly, like thick curtains being drawn. The beams caught on something massive, buried halfway into the seafloor cliff. An enormous, smooth structure, so black it seemed to drink the light instead of reflect it. No algae, no life forms, nothing natural about its shape. I leaned forward. My breath caught. It wasn't a ship. It was some kind of ancient submarine, monolithic in design, far larger than anything ever engineered by human hands. Its hull was pristine, though fused into the stone around it, and lining the surface were glowing symbols, not etched, but raised like veins, pulsing faintly with cold white light. "That's not rust," Lien murmured. "That's writing." Silva slowed the sub and hovered 50 meters from the hull. "Christ almighty, what language is that?" Lien didn't answer. We drifted slowly along the length of it, trying to make sense of the thing. Its exterior was too perfect. No welds, no seams. It curved and tapered in ways that defied traditional engineering. It was both alien and hauntingly symmetrical. And silent. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of something holding its breath. "There's a hatch up ahead," I said. I don't know why I said it with such certainty. We hadn't seen anything obvious. But a minute later, as we adjusted our angle, there it was, a recessed circular seal framed in glowing lines that formed no clear pattern but made your eyes water if you stared too long. We brought the sub closer. Then the hatch opened by itself. There was no noise, no mechanical whirring, just a smooth, precise, iris-like motion. A corridor was revealed, filled with dry air, lit from within by the same glowing veins. Silva inhaled sharply. "It's pressurized." "How was that possible?" I asked, mostly to myself. "There's no power source. No decay. It's been buried for centuries. Millennia, maybe." "We're not going in there," Silva said flatly. But the moment he said it, a hiss of static came over the comms, just for a second, and the cameras flickered. Then the sub's systems went dark. We were adrift, no power. Lights gone. Interior lights failed too, save for emergency red. It only lasted 6 seconds. When everything rebooted, the systems red-green. Engine, navigation, communications, functional. But we all knew something had changed. The hatch remained open. "Lien," I said. "Suit up." "Already ahead of you," she said, pulling on her helmet. Silva swore. "You're both out of your damn minds." But I was already moving. The airlock hissed as we stepped out, our suits sealed and tethered. We moved toward the open hatch, magnetic boots clinking lightly on the hull. The moment we crossed the threshold, the tether snapped loose, cleanly, like it had been sliced. Silva's voice burst in over the radio. "Get back now. Tether's gone." "What the hell is that?" The signal distorted, then cut off entirely. Inside, the corridor adjusted its light, dimmer, pulsing. The floor beneath our boots was smooth and strangely warm. Not metal, not stone, some composite between the two. Then the hatch slid shut behind us. Panic tried to rise in my throat, but I forced it down. Lien was breathing hard beside me, but she didn't scream, didn't speak, just kept walking forward. The corridor narrowed, then curved. No signage, no turns, just forward. Then we saw it. A chamber, massive, domed, with walls covered in that same raised script. Floating at the center was a sphere, suspended in invisible strands of magnetic force. Beneath it, a pile of rusted equipment. I stepped closer and saw old, corroded gear, mid-century diving suits, oxygen tanks, tools from the 1950s, and a body. It had been mummified by time and pressure, its face frozen in a scream. Its hand clutched a tablet of metal. Lien picked it up, brushed away silt. Words had been carved in with something sharp, desperately, unevenly, in English. "It's not a prison. It's a vault. And something is waking up." A sound came from the walls. Not quite a voice, more a pressure, like a presence pressing against the fabric of our thoughts. I turned. For a second, the chamber looked entirely different. Stone blocks instead of walls, torchlight instead of ambient glow. I blinked and it was gone. "Time's unstable here," Lien said, her voice shaking. "This place, it's bending our perception." "How do you know that?" She hesitated. "Because I've seen some of these symbols before, but not here. In dreams." We both stood frozen for a while, staring at the sphere. It pulsed slowly, white veins swirling across its surface. A rhythm like breathing. I took a step back and the sphere flickered. The air shimmered. I swear, for a split second, I saw my own body dead on the floor. Then it was gone. "Evan," Lien whispered. I think it saw you." We turned to leave. The corridor behind us was longer now. Impossible geometry, twisting, changing. The structure was alive. Halfway back to the hatch, we passed another chamber we hadn't seen before. A flicker of light. A shadow moved across the threshold. Lien grabbed my arm. "Don't look at it." "What?" "Just keep walking." The voice was her own, but deeper, not distorted by the radio. The kind of voice you hear in a memory or a nightmare. We walked fast. The hatch ahead reappeared, closed. But this time it didn't open for us. We tried the panel next to it. No response. I tried the emergency release. Nothing. "Silva, do you read?" "Silva." I tried over the comms. Static. Then, behind us, the whispering began. I couldn't make out words, but they slithered into my mind. Language I didn't understand, but felt. We backed away from the door. Then the lights in the corridor shut off, section by section, moving toward us. We ran. Just as the last lights faded, the hatch opened. We dove through, tumbling out into the dark sea. Silva's voice came through, garbled but alive. "Jesus, what the hell happened in there? Your vitals." We didn't answer. We got back in his sub, sealed the airlock, collapsed. The camera footage from our suits was corrupted. The sub's internal logs were blank for those 15 minutes. And worst of all, the symbols we saw inside the structure, they had begun appearing on the inside of our sub's hull, faintly etched like they'd always been there. I'm writing this now because we're surfacing and something isn't right. I keep hearing footsteps behind me in the corridor when no one's there. Lien won't talk anymore. She just stares out the viewport and mutters to herself. And Silva? Silva's eyes are bleeding. He says he sees the surface, but there's no light outside, just stars. Thousands of them, moving, blinking, watching. We were wrong. It wasn't buried. It was docked. And now it's not alone. We surfaced into a storm. Waves battered the support vessel as we were winched from the ocean, metal creaking and groaning under the strain. Rain lashed sideways, visibility down to a few meters, and yet not one of us said a word. Not during ascent, not during docking, not even when the hatch hissed open and the recovery team saw the blood. Silva stumbled out first, dazed, eyes unfocused. Thin trails of red ran from his tear ducts, but he said nothing. Just kept mumbling about how the sky had the wrong shape. Lien followed, slower. Her hair was soaked in sweat, not seawater, her hands trembling. I came last, clutching the soaked tablet we'd found, hidden in a waterproof pouch. I hadn't shown it to them yet. The deck crew stared at us in silence. I couldn't tell if it was because we looked half-dead or because something in us had changed and they could feel it. Some primal instinct, maybe. Like how animals go quiet before an earthquake. Commander Delaney, our mission lead, intercepted us at the airlock. A short, severe woman with eyes like glass marbles and a voice that cut through chaos. She took one look at us and said, "Medical. Now." We didn't argue. They scanned us. CATs, MRIs, blood panels. Nothing conclusive, just anomalies. Elevated neural activity, heightened cortisol, minor hemorrhaging behind the eyes, consistent across all three of us. They asked us questions, but our answers only raised more. What do we find? Why is the external footage corrupted? How did our oxygen last nearly double its capacity? And most important of all, why have we been down there for 42 minutes when, according to surface instruments, we were only gone for 8? No one believed us. Not at first, until the etchings appeared. The first night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the corridor, how it had shifted around us like a breathing lung. I lay in my bunk, eyes burning from salt and fear, staring at the ceiling, trying to forget the sound of the whispering. Then I saw it, right above my bed, one of the symbols. Faint, as if drawn in condensation, perfectly symmetrical. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and it vanished. But it came back the next night, and the next. Lien refused to come out of her cabin. When I knocked, she screamed. Not in fear, pure rage, as if I'd violated something sacred. She shouted a word I didn't understand. Not English, not Chinese, something else. When I returned the following morning, her room was empty. No sign of forced exit, just her notebook on the floor, its pages blackened from edge to edge, scribbled with a single phrase repeated endlessly. It was never meant to open. It was never meant to open. She never came back. We filed a report. Delaney marked it down as a mental break and voluntary disappearance. But I saw the way she looked at me, like she didn't believe it, like she feared it. 2 days later, the crew found something lodged inside the Orpheus's hull during inspection. A small metallic shard, irregular in shape, but humming, literally vibrating, with a low, constant tone too deep for human ears but detectable by our sensors. No one knew how it got there. Our dive logs were void of any impact, but the shard had been fused inside the sub, as if it had phased through the solid metal itself. They stored it in a sealed vacuum chamber in the lab. That night, every dog on the vessel started howling. I tried to leave, requested emergency extraction. Delaney denied it. "We need to finish the analysis," she said. "You're the only one who's seen it and come back." That was the first time I realized they weren't looking for an answer anymore. They were looking for a door, and I had walked through it. 3 days after the dive, Silva locked himself in the communications tower. When they finally got inside, they found him half-conscious, bleeding from the ears, with dozens of post-it notes glued to the monitors. Each one bore a different date, some from the future, some centuries past. He kept repeating the same phrase. "It's still down there, but it's not asleep." They sedated him, hauled him off in restraints. I haven't seen him since. I was alone now, except I wasn't. The whispering had returned. At first it was subtle, the kind of low mutter you hear when someone's talking in the next room. No words, just the cadence of thought. But over time, it became more focused, louder, direct, and it was saying my name. I stopped sleeping. I started sketching like Lien had. I didn't even realize I was doing it. Pages and pages of looping runes, unbroken spirals, interlocking sigils. Some so complex I couldn't replicate them now if I tried. But they felt, right? Familiar. One night, I woke to find myself standing in front of the vacuum chamber. The shard was glowing. I don't remember walking there, but I do remember hearing it. Not in words, in feelings, in truths. I think it was trying to teach me, or convert me. I reported none of this. I knew what would happen. I'd be locked away like Silva, or disappeared like Lien. Instead, I demanded access to the mission archive. To my surprise, Delaney approved it. It was a test. The files were worse than I imagined. There had been dives before ours. Not one. 6. All scrubbed from the official record. All carried out in extreme secrecy by multi-nation coalitions under different names. Project Azimuth, Operation Hollow, Deep Echo. Most of the dives failed on descent. The few that made it inside the structure, no survivors. But that's not what chilled me. What did was the footage. One grainy, low-resolution video clip marked as recovered. Expedition 03, Visual Segment 7A. It showed a man, eyes wide, face frozen in primal terror. He stood in a corridor I recognized. Same walls, same glow, except this man wasn't part of our team. I paused the video, zoomed in. His name patch read Rourke. My grandfather. I didn't know he had ever been in the Navy. I didn't know he had ever been down there. But now I understood why I'd been brought onto this mission without a formal interview. I was bait. A trigger. Blood recognition, perhaps. Genetic memory. I don't know. But it wanted me back. That night, I had the dream. I was walking through the sphere chamber, except now it was filled with water. The floating orb pulsed faster, and the air shimmered with impossible light. My hands were covered in something that glowed. I looked down. My reflection stared back from the black floor. But it wasn't mine. It smiled and said something in a voice that wasn't a voice. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. My cabin door was open. Delaney was waiting. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. I didn't answer. "I need you to come with me," she said. She led me down into the research wing, deeper than I'd ever been, past locked doors and armed guards, down corridors with no labels. We stopped in front of a room marked Isolation Bay 3. Inside was a tank. Suspended in fluid was another shard, but this one pulsed with color. Red, then blue, then a deep, nauseating green, and the symbols on it kept moving, rearranging themselves. "What is it?" I whispered. She looked at me. "It's broadcasting." "To what?" She stared through the glass. "That's what we're trying to find out. But it only activated when we brought the other one aboard." "Yours." "Mine." Suddenly the term felt literal. Delaney handed me a stack of photos. They showed cave systems, rock carvings, satellite imagery, the symbols. They were everywhere, hidden in plain sight across the world, painted on cave walls in Borneo, carved into Antarctic cliffs, burned into sand in the Sahara, all arranged in patterns that only made sense when aligned like a star map. "It's a language," she said, "or a code, but one written across continents, across epochs, like breadcrumbs." "Breadcrumbs to what?" "To the door." I met her eyes. "What happens when we open it?" She didn't answer. Instead, she showed me one last thing. A single page, printed on aged paper, marked Project Aegir, Final Transmission. No date, no source. It was written in English. Whatever they buried beneath the trench is not of our time or our world. It sleeps beneath layered time, watching. The structure is not a prison. It is an embassy. We are not the wardens. We are the guests, and we were never invited. The lights in the lab flickered. I heard the hum again, not in my ears, in my bones. And then I understood. It wasn't that the symbols had been carved across the Earth. It was that Earth itself was built upon them. A planetary lock. And something was turning the key. The storm never ended. For days after the second shard activated, we lost contact with mainland. At first, they blamed interference, solar flare activity, hardware malfunction. But deep down, we all knew. It was the signal. The message wasn't just being received. It was being answered. Commander Delaney ordered all non-essential crew evacuated. But I stayed. So did 4 others. Myself, Delaney, 2 linguists, and Dr. Kendrick, a cognitive neurobiologist who hadn't slept more than 2 hours a night since the dive. He claimed he could hear the patterns now, even without machines. Said they were speaking in frequencies older than words. That same night, the ocean glowed. Not brightly. Not enough to be seen from orbit. Just a subtle, sickly bioluminescence that bled from the deep like spilled ink. The sensors couldn't trace its source. Our ROVs were blind within 20 meters, like something was rejecting our technology. And that was when Delaney made her decision. "We're going back down. she said, her voice flat with exhaustion. I stared at her across the command table. You said the first dive broke protocol. We weren't ready. Now you want to go back. I want to know what's coming. And what if it doesn't want us to know? She held my gaze. Then it was already too late the moment we arrived. The second dive crew was smaller, just me, Delaney, and Kendrick. Lien was still missing. Silva was sedated, unreachable. No one else volunteered. As Orpheus descended again into the void, I watched the trench walls close around us like a throat. The ocean was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that waits behind a locked door. I kept my eyes on the sonar. Nothing for the first hour. Then a flicker. We dropped another 100 meters. The structure reappeared, unchanged in form, but different somehow. Larger? Closer? It was impossible to tell. The scale of it twisted perspective, like trying to measure a mountain while standing on it. The hatch opened again, unprompted. Delaney turned to me. You first. It responds to you. I didn't argue. We entered. The internal layout had changed. Where the first corridor had been sterile and smooth, now the walls were etched with deeper grooves, no longer random. They formed constellations, patterns of stars I recognized only from classified cosmological data, systems lost to black holes, dead galaxies, time-worn celestial graveyards. Kendrick stared at them, eyes glassy. These aren't maps, he murmured. They're memories. We moved deeper. The air smelled different this time, like burnt ozone, copper, and something faintly sweet, rotting sugar. I could feel the pressure behind my eyes again, like thoughts that weren't mine brushing the edge of consciousness. Delaney found a panel embedded in the wall, its surface rippling like liquid metal. She touched it, and the floor beneath us began to descend. An elevator. No sound, no vibration, just descent. The chamber we arrived in was vast, circular, ribbed with curved columns that arched impossibly far into the black. And in the center, suspended above a pit of shimmering fluid, was the core. It wasn't the sphere we'd seen before. This one pulsed with color, bleeding light in unnatural hues, colors without names. Shapes that shifted even as you stared. It's alive, Kendrick said. Delaney approached it. I think it's waiting. There was a platform, a dais. She stepped onto it. The core responded immediately. It opened, not physically but perceptually. Space folded around it, unveiling a corridor within the light. Not a literal tunnel, but a memory path. A channel made of experience and time, directed at us. At me. I stepped forward, and the world blinked. Suddenly, I was somewhere else. I stood on a cold plain beneath two suns, surrounded by impossible ruins. Towering statues made of glass and bone. A sky swirling with inverted stars. I felt the memories, not mine, pouring into me. This place was a prison, yes, but not for criminals. For concepts. For ideas that grew teeth. For thoughts too dangerous to think. They had come from outside our universe, slipped through when the veil between probabilities thinned. Entities not of matter or energy, but meaning. They infected language, bent time around syntax, lived in recursion. Once known, they could never be unknown. So an ancient civilization, older than memory, locked them here, in a prison shaped like understanding. And now we were unlocking it. I blinked again and returned to myself. Delaney stood frozen. Blood trickled from her nose. Kendrick was on his knees, sobbing. The core pulsed once. Then we heard the sound. Footsteps. Not loud, not fast, just steady, measured. Something approached from the far corridor. None of us moved. It stepped into the light. And it was me. Same suit, same face. But the eyes were hollow. No pupils. Just darkness, swirling like ink dropped into water. My double raised a hand. Kendrick screamed. Then the lights failed. For 10 seconds, we were blind. When they returned, the double was gone. But Kendrick was floating. Not swimming. Floating. Weightless. Limbs limp. Face twisted in something beyond fear. Delaney pulled me back toward the elevator platform. But the controls were gone. Melted. In their place, a new symbol had formed. A spiral. Endless. Hypnotic. A lock. It doesn't want us to leave, I said. Delaney nodded slowly. No, it wants you to choose. Choose what? She turned to me, eyes wide. How this ends? I realized then I'd seen that moment before. In the dream, in the flicker, in the fractured futures buried in the first shard signal. We were approaching a decision point, a point of divergence. I could reset the system, re-engage the lock, keep the vault sealed, but at a cost. One life sacrificed, mine or hers. Or I could release it, let whatever was trapped finish its transmission. Let it speak freely through every channel, digital, linguistic, emotional. Let it seed itself in everyone. I looked at Kendrick's corpse, still floating like a marionette without strings. I looked at Delaney, who understood without needing to ask. I stepped onto the dais. The core responded again. 3 options appeared in midair, symbols hanging in light. Reset, release, merge. I understood what each meant. Reset would erase the last 6 months. Time inversion, localized, would wipe the dive and all memory of it. We'd be free, but ignorant. Release would spread the signal globally, irrevocably. The virus would become part of language, thought, culture. Merge would do neither. It would join me with the vault. One mind containing the prison. One body holding the seal. Forever. Choose, Delaney whispered. I reached out and touched merge. There was no pain, only knowing. A rush of voices, memories, times that never happened in futures that had already collapsed. I saw my grandfather's face. I saw Yin's screams, looping in infinity. I saw the birth of the thing that lived in recursion. Then silence. When I woke, Delaney was gone. The chamber was sealed again. The hatch reopened, and the sub was waiting. I returned alone. The sea had stopped glowing. The sky was calm. No one remembered anything. The logs were blank. The mission file was empty. They think I was delirious. That stress caused hallucinations. That Silva died in an unrelated accident. That Lien was never on the manifest. But sometimes I see her. In mirrors. In reflections that move slightly out of sync. And I remember what I chose. Because it's still here. Inside me. Waiting. Watching. Whispering. And it wants more. There are days I forget what my own voice sounds like. Ever since the return, silence clings to me like a second skin. Too tight, too damp, always humming beneath the surface. Most people chalk it up to trauma. They say I'm lucky, that I survived something no one else could even begin to understand. They call me the last man out, a survivor of some vague classified disaster that never quite made the news. But I didn't survive it. I brought it back. The doctors say my scans are normal, aside from an uptick in neural activity they can't explain. My sleep cycles are erratic. My hearing is heightened. I've developed light sensitivity and mild aphasia, occasionally substituting words with others that don't exist. Call Trine. I said yesterday, try and order coffee. No one corrected me. The barista just smiled too widely and handed me my drink. Sometimes I wonder if I said more than I realized. The hallucinations come less frequently now, but when they do, they're precise. Tactile, temporal. I'll walk into a room and find it reversed, as though mirrored in real time. I'll blink, and suddenly all the clocks in the house are ticking backward. One night, I watched my reflection yawn 3 seconds before I did. My handlers, the ones assigned to monitor my recovery, believe I'm reintegrating well. They don't know the truth. They can't, because they don't see the changes. Not really, but I do. The stars, for instance. They're wrong. Not all of them. Just a few. Slightly misplaced. Slightly dimmer. Patterns out of sync with the known celestial maps. Polaris isn't where it should be. Orion's belt now has 4 stars. When I asked a retired astronomer about it, he chuckled nervously, then quietly removed his glasses and whispered, "You're not supposed to notice that." He died 3 days later. Cardiac arrest. No family claimed the body. I tried to attend the funeral. There wasn't one. My mail arrives in triplicate now. Each version slightly altered. My name's spelled differently. Messages phrased as though I'd written them first. One version contained a phrase that made my nose bleed immediately. Echoes anchor the broadcast. I burned that copy, but it didn't help. The next morning, the phrase was scratched into the frost on my car windshield from the inside. Then came the dreams. or what I thought were dreams. I'd wake up in strange places, standing in my kitchen, water boiling, with no memory of how I got there. I'd find notebooks I never bought, filled with diagrams of the core, detailed architectural layouts of the vault's inner structure, and long equations written in a spiraling format that loops endlessly toward the margins. One night, I found a cassette tape playing in my living room. It wasn't plugged into anything. The voice on the tape was my own. And if you're hearing this, that means the memory barrier is breaking down faster than expected. I'm not who I was. I'm a lock. I'm the door. Do not trust the language. It contains the infection. I smashed the tape, but the voice didn't stop. It simply moved. Now, I hear it in white noise, in the wind, the refrigerator's hum, the ticking of my ceiling fan. Sometimes, in the hush between thoughts, I hear myself whispering things I've never said aloud. Then the people started changing. Neighbors I'd known for years suddenly didn't recognize me. Or worse, they recognized something else. Their eyes would glaze over. Their expressions tighten. I caught one of them recording me from behind their blinds. Another walked up to me with a dead smile and said, "Welcome back, Anchor." They didn't explain what that meant. I didn't ask. And then I saw him again. The double. The reflection that isn't mine. He appears at the edge of mirrors, windows, water surfaces. Sometimes he mimics me. Other times he doesn't. Once I watched him lean closer to the glass and mouth a word I've never heard before, but instantly understood. I think that was when it fully woke up inside me. Since then, reality has felt thinner, less secure. Time slips. I'll have conversations that repeat a day later. I'll hear people call me by names I've never used. I visited my childhood home and found my bedroom untouched, preserved exactly as it was when I was 10, despite the house having burned down 20 years ago. And in the closet was the same symbol from a vault, drawn in crayon. I've stopped trying to understand what's real, because understanding is the infection. The more I grasp, the deeper it digs in. Kendrick's notes warned of it. I found them buried in a corrupted file on a drive that shouldn't exist, labeled with a string of characters that looked eerily like Lien's handwriting. In the logs, he wrote, "The signal is mnemonic in structure. It uses memory as its anchor medium. Once you think in its patterns, you're susceptible. Once you speak them aloud, you spread it. It's not a message. It's a seed. That's why I haven't spoken the true name of what we found. I never will, but I feel it always, coiled behind my consciousness like a predator in tall grass. It doesn't speak unless I let my mind wander. And when I do, it whispers promises. Knowledge, power, transcendence. It says I was chosen. It says I was bred. That everything before this, the academic career, the classified assignment, the familial link, was all part of a recursive design to build an identity that could withstand contact. An identity that could become the vessel. And now, I understand what Delaney meant when she said, I had to choose. The vault wasn't a lock. It was a mirror, and I let it see me. Now it's growing. It wants to connect again. It wants to open more doors. I've traced the symbols. I've found them across ancient ruins, old language patterns, even lullabies whispered to infants across cultures. It's been here for a long time, waiting for someone to give it shape, someone like me. But I'm not going to let that happen. I've booked a flight, chartering a ship. I'm going back to the trench, back to the source, back to it, not to destroy it. I can't. It's beyond destruction. But I might be able to contain it again, just long enough to seal myself inside. I've been studying the language, enough to reconstruct the core's protocol, its terminal glyphs, enough to realign the memory spiral. I'm the only one who can, and I need to do it before it spreads beyond me, before others begin to remember what they were never meant to know, before the stars change again. If this message is found, if anyone reads these words, burn them, erase every trace. Forget my name, forget the vault, forget the signal. It's already in too many things. Music, myths, code, ideas, stories. This story. And if you've listened this far, you're infected too. Final transmission. We discover vault. We mistook it for a ruin. We mistook it for the past. It was a message from the future, left by something that will never have a name. Do not try to find me. Do not try to follow. Do not speak of this again, because it knows when it's being told.